Hello and welcome to another edition of Nevada on the Air. I'm very pleased to have Congresswoman Dina Titus on today's program. She has a long and distinguished record of serving the state in a variety of roles. She taught government at UNLV. She's an expert on the history of policies related to nuclear power as well as nuclear energy, and we will be talking about Yucca Mountain today. She was a Nevada state senator for nearly 20 years. She's currently in her 7th term.
Where does the time go?
I know, in the House of Representatives, I'm going to say she must have got elected when she was 13, right? Yeah. And she serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, as well as the Homeland Security and Foreign Affairs Committees, and several subcommittees as well. Thank you for joining us today, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Let's start off with some very exciting news. You and I have been in this town forever and a day. We've been seeing this high-speed train idea going back to Mayor Bill Breer's bullet train and whatever, and here you are at the groundbreaking, particularly for your committee assignment. Did you ever think this day would come?
Well, I'm an optimist, Mitch, now, or I wouldn't be in this business, so I hoped that it would, but you're right. I was appointed to the Nevada-California Super Speed Train Commission by Bob Miller when he was governor in the early 90s. So all through his administration, Kenny Gwynn kept me on the commission, and then Jim Gibbons did too. I'm not sure he even knew it existed, but he didn't take me off. So we worked on a speed train. We rode the TGV, the AVI, the trains in Asia. We went to the test center for maglev, but it just never could quite get there because it was always a funding jurisdictional problem. So now to have it put this first spike in the ground, it's pretty exciting.
It's really going to happen. Now, as I understand it, it would go to Rancho Cucamonga, and then the existing rail service would take it into downtown Los Angeles. Is that how it works?
That's right. It will connect up there. And at the ceremony, not only did we have Secretary Pete Buttigieg, but we had two of the representatives, my colleagues in the House, from those Southern California districts. So they see it as a benefit for them as well as for Las Vegas.
I can't wait to take it. I mean, I'm fascinated by train travel anyway. And you know how Amtrak used to come through.
Yeah.
So I think some people that are anxiously waiting for it to happen and probably would take it and maybe even bypass along security lines at Reed International Airport in order to try this out.
Well, that's right. It used to be quicker to go by air, but that's not the case anymore. Time you park and you go through security, and so the planes are delayed often. So I think it will be competitive, and it'll be kind of part of the experience because you don't have to worry about driving or parking. You just hop on the train and the vacation begins.
As part of your committee, you've been involved in several transportation projects, including some involving the RTC. Why don't you tell us about some of those?
Well, it's not a very sexy committee. You say infrastructure, people kind of go, eh. But if you think about it, that's really important for Southern Nevada because we got to get people in and out of here, products in and out of here. And when they're here, you got to move them around with our growing home population. So some of the RTC things are transferring from fossil fuel buses to more natural clean energy buses, electric and hydrogens. That's one thing. Another thing is safe streets. You know, we've got people in wheelchairs, people on scooters, people walking, bicycles, buses, cars, limousines. So with a lot of users of the road, and we want to make it safe for all of them. Some of that means pushing bus stops back, more curb access, hot spots, so you at least put up a covered bus stop. So that makes it a user-friendly for everybody who's on our streets and roads.
Oh, very nice. Everyone was holding their breath over a delayed reaction to approving critical foreign aid assistance to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan. It happened, but the speaker caught some flack from members of his own party over that.
Oh, yeah.
And so how did that all come down?
Well, the frustrating thing is we ended up doing exactly what we would have done anyway 2 months ago. It just took 2 extra months because of internal politics, and not internal between Democrats and Republicans, but internal within the Republican Party. You know, they have such a slim margin that 2 or 3 people can hold them hostage, and that's exactly what Marjorie Taylor Greene led the effort to do that and said if we gave any money to Ukraine, she would put in a motion to vacate the chair, throw the speaker out. So he had to choose between doing the right thing and living up to our obligation internationally and potentially losing his job. I think he did the right thing, but I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been pretty much just just lost any kind of credibility that she might have had. She may have it with a handful, but more reasonable Republicans knew that that's just not the way you run a railroad.
And is that because the Democrats would help bail out the speaker?
Well, there is some speculation that even if she got the 3 or 4 votes that would keep him from getting a majority of the Republicans, some Democrats, because of what he did in this instance, would vote to keep him there. For one thing, it's for the good of the government and the country, because last time it took them 3 weeks to find a new speaker when they vacated McCarthy. And secondarily, it was the right thing to do, so maybe he needs to be rewarded. And the final thing is, God knows you could get somebody worse. So there's this talk. It's not been decided within the caucus if they would do that or not, because there are plenty of downsides to having his leadership. But at least it's being speculated.
How do you explain, and I know it's maybe difficult to explain the opposing party and some of the reasoning that they have, that they tend to be very pro-Israel, but some members of the Republican Party say, no, not Ukraine, even though Putin, former KGB agent, a communist leader, do you know the reasoning behind that?
It's astounding. Back in the 60s, they accused the Democrats of being the parlor pinks, and the communist leaning and all. And now it's Marjorie Taylor Greene is Moscow Marjorie. All that she does is parrot Putin's propaganda when it comes to Ukraine. And those people, besides I think, are just crazy and not very informed. They aren't looking at the big picture long term in 2 ways. One, the U.S.'s responsibility to its allies and as an international leader. And second, it's not just about Ukraine, it's about Putin pushing further and further west into the Baltics, into the Balkans, into Moldova. He's not going to be satisfied just with Ukraine. He wants to recapture that whole Soviet Union territory. So it's protecting democracy at large.
And I understand the speaker saw some of those classified briefings, and it was irrefutable. Some of the evidence that he saw just totally convinced him that, no, we need to get behind Ukraine.
I think that's right. Because if we don't, if they fall first, then it's just keeping on. And I think it's real evident.
As part of that language, and I guess in Congress you can tuck any language into any subject, unlike the Nevada state legislature, right? There was this, and people think it's a ban of TikTok, but it's more that they want to divest this Chinese-owned interest of TikTok. Explain that.
Well, TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, and all the information you put into TikTok just goes straight to China. Chinese companies often just pretty much equal Chinese government. So then not only do they get how you dance on TikTok, but they get access to your other information through that channel. So this bill was to cause that company to divest of TikToks. In other words, sell it to somebody else. And if they do that within 9 months with one possible expansion, you won't know the difference. It'll just be somebody else, a U.S. company or some European owning it. But if they don't divest and China keeps control of it, then there's talk that they'll ban it here. It's already banned by government agencies. Government agencies don't allow employees to use TikTok accounts. That doesn't mean you can't look at TikTok, but you don't have your own account, just because of international security.
Gotcha. I did want to ask you about the FISA reauthorization. That was another bill that got stuck. Usually that's fairly easy to get through. What happened with that one?
Well, that came about after 9/11, where it gave our security agencies more access to people's email and private records, so we could help to track down possible connections with terrorists. So if you were communicating with somebody outside the country, then your communications were susceptible to being intercepted if that person was under suspicion. That was kind of a complicated way of saying it. Well, it came up for renewal. And again, a matter of national security to give the authorities the right to do that without getting a second warrant. They already get a warrant from the international court, but not a second warrant. But the Republicans now have turned the FBI and the agencies that deal with security into the enemy because they are claiming that they have done all this investigation into Donald Trump and they're the reason he's in trouble, or into some of the members, and they don't like that. So now they are trying to portray that as you can't give them access to information because they'll turn on you. And so again, that's flipped. It used to be Democrats who were more concerned about it than Republicans, and now the Republicans are portraying themselves as victims, and they were opposed to it. It ended up passing pretty bipartisan, but it took some doing.
And Trump, I think, got involved.
Oh, yeah, he's just, whatever he says, they do. He says, don't do it because they came after me, they'll come after you. Just like don't fund Ukraine. I think he was still mad because Ukraine wouldn't back him up when he tried to use them as an excuse in the early Biden, Trump impeachment, last cycle. So yeah, he tells them don't fund the Ukraine, don't do FISA, don't do anything on the border, don't do anything that will help Joe Biden in the next election or help Democrats, and they follow suit.
As long as I've known you, and I think we've known each other maybe 30 years, certainly 25 years.
Yeah,
the subject we bring up whenever I talk to you or interview you is Yucca Mountain. And I thought, we haven't heard much about Yucca Mountain. But sure enough, it reared its ugly head again.
Yeah.
Republicans and Democrats, by the way, are bringing it up. So, and you have, why don't you go ahead and talk about it? You actually have the Nuclear Waste Informed Consent Act,
yes,
correct?
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, that says that you can't put waste anywhere that the place where you're putting it doesn't consent. So it would be Nevada consenting, and the county, and any Native American tribes have to consent, because you don't need to dump waste on people that don't want it. And so that would give us a voice in that process. Now, the interesting thing is they have put informed consent in a bill to create an interim storage facility, but not in the one to create the permanent storage facility. So I keep pushing that. But you're right, it never goes away. As long as there are power plants with waste, they're going to keep looking for a place to put it. And they've invested here already, so they see this as a place to go. I worry about that. I never let my guard down. We don't make it. We don't use it. We shouldn't have to store it because there are just so many problems with Yucca Mountain, from the geology to the water to the transportation. And how do you put up a sign that says danger that people will be able to read 10,000 years from now? What does that look like?
Yeah.
10,000 years people are seeing that. But you're right, too, that it's not a partisan issue. I can't go to my Democratic friends and say, help us out, because Democrats have these facilities in their district. So it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's not liberal versus conservative. It's we got it versus we're going to put it on you.
I understand it. I think this is old or old information that I had, but isn't Yucca Mountain at capacity now? If there's so much storage out there that if they were to say, yeah, we're moving to Yucca Mountain, they'd have to find another site in order to store all this stuff. It doesn't seem like this was thought through originally.
Well, in the original bill that goes back to the 82.
The Screw Nevada bill.
Well, Screw Nevada came in 88, but the original bill said that they were going to pick two sites, one in the west and one in the east. Well, the Screw Nevada bill in 88 eliminated the one in the east and said, no, we're just going to focus on Yucca Mountain. What people don't know is that a lot of low-level waste is being stored out there even as we speak, and it's going right through Nevada and going out there in a temporary capacity. But there is nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
That's true. I do want to touch on one last subject before I let you go, and that is, and I looked at these statistics, alarming would be an understatement, and that is, so far this year, January, February, and March, just 3 months, 125 mass shootings, resulting in 208 deaths. It's almost so commonplace that it doesn't get any more headlines. It's buried, and people are sort of like desensitized to it.
I think that's right. It's terrible. And even in the House, thoughts and prayers. We get our thoughts and prayers, and that's all they do. There is a gun violence prevention caucus. I'm a member of it. And we've introduced a number of bills to get rid of automatic weapons or multi-shot, what you put in the gun that shoots more than once, ammunition belts, the bump stocks that they used at
1 October.
Yeah. Safe storage, that's something that the president just did with executive order, but I'm sure there'll be lawsuits against it. But we just can't get the Republicans to bring it up for a vote. They just refuse. And if they're either bound by the NRA or their own philosophy, some of them send out Christmas cards with their children holding machine guns or automatic weapons. We keep trying. And the public sentiment is so much in favor of. 70% of people want to see tighter background checks. The executive order that the president did for safe storage also has to do with background checks, so that you close that loophole for gun shows, because you can get a gun at a gun show, no background check at all, unlike getting a gun at a store. So hopefully something can be done. But, the worst mass shooting in the history of the U.S. was in my district, the Mandalay Bay. And then, look, just recently at UNLV. So, yeah, it's not stopping. There's no question.
I remember Senator Feinstein had that ban. That was a temporary ban in place for, 10 years or 15 years. And then it sunsetted. And it didn't involve assault weapons or automatic weapons that. Right. And it seemed like it had bipartisan support. And then it shifted somehow. I know.
Well, the problem got worse. And you would think that it would have more support now than in the past, but it sure doesn't. Everything they argue is like nose under the tent. You're going to take away my machine gun, and then tomorrow it's my bump stock, and the next day it's my hunting rifle. And that is not true. Nobody's against the Second Amendment. My daddy used to go hunting till he had two little girls who saw Bambi. That put a stop to that. But, target shooting, that kind of thing. But responsible gun owners agree that you need some of these checks. You don't use an automatic weapon to hunt a deer. So this public support is there. It's just the political will is not.
One last question. That has to do with your reelection campaign. You always fight, no matter who the opponent is. You just act like you've got to be out there and knocking on doors and touching, shaking hands and folks. How do you sense the campaign is going? And should you be elected, what are you looking for in the next term to do?
Well, I follow Richard Bryan's advice. You either run scared or run unopposed. So we're always running hard. You're right about that, Mitch. I don't have a primary this year, so that's good. The top two Republicans do have a primary, so I don't know who my opponent's going to be till June. But it doesn't really matter because they're both basically the same. They're going to try to out-Trump each other. They both are opposed to these gun measures we were talking about. They're both opposed to a woman's right to choose. So it won't make much difference which one comes out of it. But I think that I'm optimistic in the sense that I think now some of the things that we did as Democrats are starting to sink in, like the $3 billion we got for the speed train and $2 billion in infrastructure improvements, that lowering the drug price to $35 for what do you call it?
Diabetes, for insulin.
Insulin, right. People now are starting to realize that. And Joe Biden's numbers are going up. Trump is looking terrible in these trials that he's facing. And so even if he doesn't lose his base, I think that the large number of nonpartisans just won't bring themselves to vote for him. So that will affect up and down the ticket. So it's not like we're going to quit working hard, but I think will prevail. And I think the House will go Democratic. It's that close margin. I think the Democrats will take the House. The Senate's going to be tougher.
It does seem like abortion, though, you happened to mention that, even in southern states, red states, conservative states, right. It's a mobilizing issue for voters to show up and say, no, you've gone too far.
Absolutely. Even I think it was Kansas where they had a question on the ballot, and the question prevailed for choice. So it's red and blue states where women feel very strongly about the right to make their own decisions. I thought maybe the issue would kind of peter out, as you said about Yucca Mountain, but it's not. They see that Supreme Court is taking away first abortion, then they want to take it away nationwide, then they went after IVF, and next is going to be birth control. So that's just too much.
And almost they see the writing on the wall. You know, Trump says, well, no, I'm not really for a nationwide ban, and I want to leave it up to the states, because evidently they see this is not a winning issue.
I think that's right. They backed off of it considerably. They're just trying to hedge. But, you know, that argument of leaving it up to the states, that means you support the thing that the worst state has done. And you look at Florida, look at Texas. It's almost, you can't have an abortion in 6 weeks. Many women don't even know they're pregnant in 6 weeks. Besides, your rights shouldn't be a matter of geography. Why should my rights be any different from a woman's rights in Alabama?
Yeah. Congresswoman Titus, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For joining us today. And I want to thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.